Everybody good? Yep. Everybody say yay if you're good. Yay, good. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, welcome to everybody to Samui Real session 160. Kids, stop it. Unexpected, as always. Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate a good turnout tonight for our special guest here. As you can see next to me is Mr. Pepe Escobar. A big hand for him. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a privilege to have him here. And also on our right, we have our own Samui grown Dr. Eamon McKinney. Big hand for Eamon. Okay, guys. So you know the rules. I don't need to really repeat the house rules. It's basically what the format for tonight will be the same as usual, except for a little twist. Dr. Eamon's going to start off with some questions to Pepe. So I'm going to read Pepe Escobar, his bio. It sort of reads like as long as one of the many books he's written. So I'm just going to give you a background. I understand that many people in the room are followers, as they were followers of Matt Ehret and everyone else, which you reminded me. A big welcome to all our Zoomers out there. I think I see Drago. Bosnick. A big hand for the Zoomers. Thank you very much for the effort to come here. Just so you know, we have people zooming in. Matt Ehret, for example, from Canada. We have I hope Vanessa Bealey from Syria. I know we have Charles Koves coming in from Australia. We have Drago Bosnick there, Drago there from Serbia. We have Janet Bunting in Japan. We have people in the US, many all around the world are zooming in for this special occasion. So we are really lucky to have Pepe Escobar here. So let me get down to the introduction, because I know you know it, but you need to hear this again. So Pepe Escobar was born in 1954 in Brazil. His profession, obviously, is he's a journalist, author, and geopolitical analyst. So his early career began in 1982 in journalism, and he started as a culture critic, editor, and then as a foreign correspondent based in London, Paris, Milan, Los Angeles, Singapore, Bangkok, and recently Istanbul and Moscow. So post 9/11, following the September 11th attacks, he concentrated on conflict zones, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, Central Asia, China, Iran, Iraq, and the broader Middle East. For the past 10 years, he's been focused on Eurasia integration, the new Silk Roads, and NATO expansion. So currently, his current roles include serving as a roving correspondent for Asia Times for nearly 20 years now, writing the column, The Roving Eye, covering international relations from the Middle East and Central Asia and all across Eurasia. The Real News is an analyst from 2007 to the early 2010s on geopolitical dynamics. He's written columns for countless publications, including Counterpunch and Tom Dispatch in the US, the South China Morning Post, Al Jazeera English, and RT and Sputnik. So currently he is a columnist for the Cradle in Beirut, Sputnik International, Moscow, and Strategic Culture, also in Moscow. So key concepts and theories. So Pipelinistan, I love this word, Pipelinistan. I think it's a new word made up by Pepe, I think. Escobar's term for the strategic importance of oil and gas pipelines in Central Asia. He argues that Western interventions are driven by a desire to reduce reliance on Russian and Iranian energy sources. Critics argue that his views may oversimplify complex geopolitical issues and question the accuracy of his claims, particularly concerning the Syrian civil war. Page 17. Globalistan. I'm kidding. Globalistan. Another word. His book, Globalistan, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. Okay. How the globalized world is dissolving into liquid war. Pepe explores the intersections of globalization, energy conflicts, and war. He argues that globalization is fragmenting the world into regions of explosive inequality and conflict, which he terms liquid war. The book combines reportage and analysis from various conflict zones and is described as an atlas of the world's ongoing conflicts. Publications. Books. Globalistan. Was that better? Yeah. How the globalized world is dissolving into liquid war, published in 2007. Red Zone Blues, a snapshot of Baghdad during the surge, 2007. Obama does Globalistan, 2009. Next one, Empire of Chaos, published in 2014. 2030 is the name of a book, published in 2015. Raging Twenties, we've all been there, published in 2021. Eurasia versus NATO-stan, Chronicles of Liquid War, published in 2024. And he's also contributing editor, The Empire in the Crescent. Tato and Vendita.
Yeah.
Okay, Shia Power, Next Target Iran. These are books from many years ago.
Many years ago, yeah.
And the current affiliations is associated with the Paris-based European Academy of Geopolitics. Currently, Pepe resides between Paris, Moscow, and Bangkok. Hopefully Samui in the future, right? Hopefully Samui in the future. Yes. Controversies and criticisms. So Pepe is basically accused of everything, from Al-Qaeda agent to Maoist and Putinista, especially because of associations with Russian media outlets, RT and Sputnik News. My bad, excuse me, sorry, unintended. So just to summarize, Pepe Escobar is a seasoned journalist and geopolitical analyst known for his extensive coverage of conflict zones and critical perspectives on global energy politics. His notable works include Globalistan, which examines the impact of globalization and energy conflicts on world stability, and Empires of Chaos, detailing what the US is up to around the world. He's always faced non-stop criticism by Western mainstream media because he is one of the very few global analysts who details the mechanisms of empire as they are. And we truly hope to see Pepe and his lovely wife, Stephanie, he's also here tonight. A big hand for them both. Back on Frank Samuel.
Thank you very much.
And this is just the beginning. That was the end of the bio. That's the beginning of the session. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Eamon, and he's going to continue.
Jesus.
Thank you, Matt.
Can you hear me? Yeah, good. That was really impressive. Even I didn't know you were that smart.
It's all fake.
Yeah?
It's all fake.
Oh, okay. Well,
remember Orson Welles. It's all fake.
Yeah, I think we covered that one week. To echo Pat's welcome, Pepe.
Thank you very much.
For many of us in the group, we have been following you since we can't remember when. And for those who follow you, in terms of the coverage and the analysis that you do, you are the gold standard, my brother. So you are very, very welcome here.
Thank you.
What I would like to do is get to the Q&A as quickly as possible. But we might start off with just a couple of quick ones, because we had some people proposing, jokingly, I think, a couple of starting questions for you. So I think we all read your tweet on the Paris Olympics. You tweeted out about the Paris Olympics.
Oh, yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah, it seems like a long time ago.
It's crazy because in our profession, the notion of rhythm disappears. It's like a crazy continuum. So you are working at 3 a.m. My wife knows that very well. Sometimes you don't sleep because you're working. When you wake up in the morning, you are already working. Because we have to follow the news cycle, and at the same time, we have to interpret connections that are usually hidden on purpose, and sometimes in a very, very clever manner, so people will never make these connections. For instance, the Americans are very good at changing the narrative all the time. When the narrative doesn't suit them, they install another narrative. So it's a cascade of narratives, some of them clashing, some of them completely no connection at all. And it's up to us, independents. And we are very few. In English language, you can count 50, 80, 100 independent analysts, max, writing in English for a global audience. So we are a very small club. And We know each other, most of us. We talk to each other, we exchange information. And of course, we are targets. And in extreme cases, like when they boarded a plane at JFK to take Scott Ritter out of the plane, this is what happens. And in the case of Julian Assange, you all know what happened. And this was a message to all of us. So whenever we have privileged information, our judgment, okay, how are we going to treat that? Are we going to publish it raw? Are we going to publish it through a messenger? Are we ignoring it? Are we going to ignore it completely? And it happens all the time. For instance, the most absolutely outrageous aspects of everything that is behind the genocide in Gaza, we cannot publish.
If we do, we're going to get killed. There's no question about that. And we know the limits, right? When it comes to trying to explain the new axis of evil, Russia, China, Iran, according, of course, to the State Department, the Pentagon, CIA, etc., we also know our limits. And every time that we offer background to what's happening, especially these past 2 or 3 years, since the start of the special military operation, we know that it's a very slippery terrain as well. So, but, it's deep down, we are still anarchists, aren't we, all of us?
We like to think so.
Yeah, we are a mix of Buddhists, Taoists, anarchists, and rock and rollers. So, so we always have this highway to hell playing, in the back of our heads, okay, all right. So that's what makes it challenging and not sleeping. It's not a big deal, especially now, because now we are in the middle of something that we could never imagine as late as 2 years ago, or maybe a year ago, which is a civilizational war. We have 3 major ancient civilizations, which not by accident are united now: Persia, China, and Russia. And they see what's on the other side, and they see how frightening it is, and they see how desperate they are. And we have instances of that on an everyday basis, from terrorism, which is the only thing left for Ukraine against Russia in Donbass, Novorossiya, to the genocide in Gaza and all the ramifications of the genocide in Gaza. And it's what all of us, we call it the forever wars. Because it's the same imperial modus operandi of controlling what we call the global south, global majority, the absolute majority of the former third world, right? And by now, everybody who is reasonably informed can detect everything that happened, even before the Kennedy assassination, all those coups in Latin America, preventing Africa from developing, the domino theory in Southeast Asia in the 60s and the 70s, the Contras in Nicaragua, and then, of course, that fabulous concept that came out, not out of nowhere, but actually out of the mouth of an Israeli prime minister, the war on terror. Very few people remember 2 hours after 9/11, was still in the morning, was around EST, was probably between 11 and 11:30. Ehud Barak came out on air, if I'm not mistaken, on BBC World, and he said, "This is the beginning of a war on terror." And that became instantly the new narrative, and the new narrative for the new millennium. Most people, they don't make these connections. They think, no, this was a decision, a thoughtful decision by the Pentagon, the CIA, State Department, National Security. No. And Of course, if we get into the 9/11 operation, then we'll be in this bunker for at least 1 week. So let's leave it at that, right? As an instance of how the American system thought they would be able to control the new millennium and make this the second American century. And as we all know, it went terribly wrong. First of all, because they got the wrong enemy. They prefabricated an enemy which was not even an enemy that was against American national interests. It was an enemy against Israeli interests. It's a completely different story. And they conducted a war on terror, which means absolutely nothing, literally, against a concept that doesn't mean absolutely nothing. But in real life, it was a war against at least 7 or 8 lands of Islam, different nations, and Islam as a whole. The problem is they picked the wrong enemy, because while they were doing that, Russia and China, they were involved in their national development projects. In the case of Russia, recovering from the 90s, and in the case of China, growing at 10, 12, 14% a year, and becoming a super industrial trade power, which they are now, the #1 economy in the world. And when the Americans woke up, it was too late. It was a few years ago already. It was at the beginning of the, let's say, Trump 1.0, if there is a Trump 2.0, of course. In 2017, the people around Trump actually told them, look, we are losing the technological race against China. China had come up with the concept of made in China 2025. Okay, in 2025, we're going to be these top 10 technological fields. We're going to be the leader, or at least the second best. And obviously, the American reaction was, okay, sanctions, sanctions, sanctions. It's the definition of American foreign policy. Sanctions, sanctions. It didn't work. The Chinese did something wonderfully clever. They simply erased the term made in China 2025 and continued to do what they were doing. And nowadays, 2024, 1 year to 2025, they are leaders in at least 7 or 8 of these top 10. Everything. Artificial intelligence, supercomputers, quantum computing, electric vehicles, solar panels, you name it. This is something that you know very well. We lived in China, right? And in the case of Russia, it was much more complicated because it involves the atavic hate of the British ruling class vis-a-vis Russia, the destruction of Russia during the 90s, the fact that the Americans thought that they won the Cold War, so then they could do anything they wanted and treat Russia as a pariah or as a vassal or as nothing. And then one day, Vladimir Putin goes to the Munich Security Conference in 2007 and says, look, this system that you have, the unilateral world order, we don't agree with that. So he instantly became the new Hitler. The thing is, he had already the building blocks to start to make Russia recover from the disaster of the 90s. And this is something that when you are in Moscow and you discuss with people who actually lived this time, the horror stories that they tell you of the destruction of Russia, social organization, industry, the military, it's something absolutely unbelievable. And these people actually lived it. And they recovered from it, which is even more impressive. And the people around Putin at really high positions of power, for instance, Patrushev was previously with the Security Council, Secretary of the Security Council. Now he's a special advisor to Putin. These people, they are in their early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. They lived all that. They learned the lessons, and they are implementing the lessons now. And they understand what it takes to be a great power, and at the same time, what it takes to be a great power capable of counteracting the other great power. So it's impossible to explain to all of you guys in a few minutes the complexity of how China in one side of the strategic partnership and Russia on the other side, they refashioned everything. They did the Deng Xiaoping, crossing the river while filling the stones on an everyday basis and in every aspect of life, socially, anthropologically, militarily, conceptually, etc. So this is what makes it so extraordinary. And this is what makes their comprehensive strategic partnership, which is how they define it nowadays, so powerful and so frightening for the American elites. When I say American elites, of course, many of you know that Washington, which is a very provincial town, by the way, and the elites are fragmented. You have old money, you have old families, you have old families from the East Coast, you have some from other states, you have transatlantic elites, you have ultra-Atlanticists, you have moderate Atlanticists, you have new money, you have Silicon Valley, you have investment banks, you have ultra-new money like BlackRock, etc. So, but they all interact, they all talk. And they're not going to talk at Bilderberg or Davos. They talk in private clubs and private dinners. This is where the real decisions are made. And then they send some emissaries to Bilderberg to talk to the Financial Times, But then the decisions are already made. And what we get from our connections, let's say, around the matrix, and our connections are all dissidents. Some of them are part of the ruling class, but they are dissidents. And they trust us as independent analysts because they say, look, this whole thing is falling apart because of this. And this is how we get this kind of information about example. Okay, I'll give you guys an example that happened these past few days, which is something absolutely mind-boggling. Russian intelligence discovered that the Ukrainian intelligence, the SBU, and the military intelligence, the GRU, they were planning a plot to assassinate Putin and the new Russian Ministry of Defense at the parade, naval parade in St. Petersburg. This in itself is the beginning of World War III. So in a normal situation, we would have, for instance, the head of the FSB, intelligence in Russia, Bortnikov, or Patrushev, the guy who used to be in the Security Council. They will call William Burns from the CIA and say, look, are you going to do this? Are you going to give a green light for those goons in Kiev to do this? You know what's going to happen. This time was much more serious. The Russian Minister of Defense, which had not spoken to the Pentagon since he came to power, he picked up the phone, he called Lloyd Austin, the head of the Pentagon. We wish we had the transcript of the conversation. Unfortunately, we don't. So he called Lloyd Austin and said, look, basically, this is what he said. It was the guy who actually volunteered this information is a brilliant man that we know personally, Sergei Ryabkov. He's the vice foreign minister of Russia. Outstanding diplomat. And he gave an interview to Russian TV, more or less telling the story, but he said, look, I cannot get into details because this is a state secret. But more or less, he told what happened. So listening to what he said, we can more or less understand that the defense minister of Russia told the head of the Pentagon, if you allow this thing to happen, you know that Kiev is going to be reduced to ashes. And if you, United States, support it, you will be reduced to ashes. So this is where we are at the moment, where you have the heads of the two most powerful military in the world, and one of them is telling the other, can you please behave like an adult? Do I have to explain to you how it works? What if we had a plan to assassinate the crash test dummy that you have as president? What would you do? So you think that you are entitled to support the same scheme against our president. And this, I think this could explain to all of you the level of disaggregation and the possibility of a civilized interaction and dialogue between the two major military powers in the world. And this is something that when you talk to Russian diplomats, for instance, Sergei Lavrov, the top diplomat on the planet, the best foreign minister for the past 100,000 years. And he sat with us in late February in Moscow. He took 1 hour and a half from his mega busy schedule. We are a small group of visitors, including foreigners. And he said, look, we tried everything to talk to the Americans, to talk to Europeans, to talk to the European Union. It's impossible. It's impossible. We tried everything in the book and off the book. So now there is no dialogue. It's the lowest in terms of international relations and diplomacy between the West and Russia ever. Even in the Cold War, we could sit down in Reykjavik, for instance, and have a discussion. Now this is so the fact that this division is as toxic as it is now. The fact that the American elites now starting to get the picture that the project Ukraine is a total failure. And it will be a failure, inevitable, and there's no plan B because they never had a plan B. And the fact intertwined with what's happening in Israel, Palestine, where the whole world knows exactly this is a genocide and why the genocide is taking place. And the fact that not only Washington, but Brussels, the West, the collective West, the collective West political economic supports the genocide against the majority of the planet. That's why we are in the middle of the most serious civilizational war in living memory. So we had on one side, I call it NATO stun, half in jest, but it's relatively serious because it's the NATO space. So it's Canada, US, Atlanticism, Western Europe, and parts, almost everybody in Eastern Europe. And Eurasia as a whole, which goes beyond Eurasia, because we can call it also Afro-Eurasia. The penetration of Russia and China in Africa, their penetration economic in Latin America. So basically, it's a synonym of a global majority as well. So it's NATO stun on one side, the global majority on the other, and it's a civilizational clash, and the possibility of this derailing into a hot war is in front of us, literally. It could happen as we speak. It could happen in a matter of a few days. Knowing how the Persians think, and it's funny because the Persians did read Sun Tzu. They know about the art of war. What they're doing now is brilliant. It's strategic ambiguity, waiting game, and running psyops. And the Zionists and the Americans look at that, when they're going to attack, what are they going to do, which missiles they're going to, and they are like headless chickens, literally. It's an absolutely fascinating process, and you see how unprepared the dominating system is when it comes to a really hot situation, a situation that they cannot control, for instance, economically. Because they control the international financial system, it's very easy to slap sanctions against anybody. It's very easy to disconnect Russia from SWIFT. But now you're facing an adversary that has hypersonic missiles, that is supported by Russia, that is also supported by China. So this axis of evil actually exists because they have strategic partnerships, interlocking in strategic partnerships. There is an Iran-Russia, Iran-China, China-Russia. And they are sort of representing the global majority in the global south as the adults in the room against the crazies on the other side. Okay, I'm oversimplifying, I agree, for the purpose of starting a discussion with all of you. But Les jeux sont faits, as the French say. You know, that this is where we are at the moment, and we are all hostages. Because this is another example. I'll, if I have the chance, I'd like to read something for you later on of the kind of people who are controlling the government in Tel Aviv. I would say that 99.9% of the global population have no idea there is an eschatological cult that wants a war, a total war, and these people are in power in Tel Aviv, and these are the people who are supporting the Prime Minister of Israel, who goes to Congress in the United States and gets 58 standing ovations. So we have to be extremely worried about this, you know. Wow, so call this a small introduction. And then let's stay here for another week.
Well, thank you, Pepe. I know that a lot of the work you've been doing just recently has been about West Asia specifically. Can you tell us, I mean, first, define what West Asia is and tell us why that's so important.
West Asia is the former Middle East. I'm sure all of you remember the expression Far East. Who coined the expression Far East? The British Empire, because it was so far away from London. You know, all those yellow people over there. You know, very. Middle East is the same thing. It's not so far, so let's call them Middle. So these are Anglocentric, Eurocentric, Orientalist notions. That region where all the major troubles are concentrated is West Asia and Southwest Asia. You just look at the basic look at the map, it's all there. Just like you're not going to say that Uzbekistan is in West Asia. No, Uzbekistan is in Central Asia. You look at Nepal. Nepal is in South Asia. So if you look at Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, etc., they are in West Asia. So this is something that there's an agreement between among many of us to start calling a new terminology. So we have been calling West Asia for the past 2 years at least. And why it's important? Look at what may happen in the next few hours, days, or weeks. Response by what we call the axis of resistance, which is a compound. It's Iran, Hezbollah, militias in Iraq, we call Hashd al-Shabi. These are different militias. They are incorporated to the Ministry of Defense in Iraq, and they are protected by the Iraqi state. They are protected by Baghdad. And those absolute pop stars of the global south nowadays, the Houthis in Yemen, which became more popular than Mick Jagger all over the world because they had the balls to go against the U.S. Navy in the Red Sea. And guess what? The Americans chickened out and left. They admitted that they were basically the Houthis won against the most powerful navy in the history of the galaxy. How could that happen? It's very simple. If you have decent anti-ship missiles, which they do, if you have the possibility of having extra decent anti-ship missiles that they could get from Iran via the black market or directly, everybody from the Bab al-Mandeb to the Red Sea is a sitting duck. And it took the Americans a few days to see, oh shit, we have to get out of here. And that's exactly, so that's why this is so crazy. Well, so at the moment, as we speak, we are waiting for a response by the axis of resistance as a whole to major provocations by Israel, which were designed to provoke a war. So we have to recognize how clever these Talmudic psychopathological genocidals in Tel Aviv are. They are clever. They pitted the Americans on one side, the Iran on the other side. Okay, let's provoke a war between these two. because if we make a provocation and Iran reacts, the Americans will have to support us, Israel. So it's a very clever geopolitical game, which may backfire and will backfire, but this is the way they think. So what we're waiting at the moment is an extremely complex game, especially by the Iranians who are deciding how to do it. They have strategic advice from the Russians, but the major decisions will be in Tehran. How we're going to respond to the assassination of the super Hezbollah commander in Beirut and the assassination of Haniyeh, the political coordinator of Hamas in Tehran at 2 a.m. by a missile coming from a drone. Nobody knows who launched this drone. Was certainly launched inside Iran, which gets us to the fifth columnist collaborator angle, which is very complex. So this is where we are at the moment. We are waiting for, if this response is judged to be too harsh, and it will be, this will be the catalyst for a regional war, and obviously the Americans will step in, and then all bets are off.
There was something I heard, you perhaps should comment on it. We all saw Joe Biden's disastrous, debate with Trump.
Yes.
The next day, like a light switch, 100% of the media was against Biden. Now, granted, he made an idiot of himself, but all acting like they didn't know before. What I heard was that Biden had said to Netanyahu, if you go into Lebanon, you're on your own. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. Well, there are several layers of complexity in this story. Why Netanyahu went to Congress? First of all, because Congress is controlled by AIPAC. So the Israelis control 98% of the US Congress. He went there, of course, to get legitimation for anything he does. He talked. The most important conversation was not with Biden, was with Trump in Mar-a-Lago. Because he took, basically, of course, we don't have a verbatim smoking gun. But basically, he told Trump, look, this is what we're going to do over there. And Trump said, okay, as long as it's not too far out, go ahead. And with Biden, Netanyahu knew that Biden was not Biden. In fact, I call it the combo. There's no Biden. That's a crash test dummy. Teleprompter, earpiece, you name it. The combo is very, very dangerous. The combo is not only Jake Sullivan and Blinken, Secretary of State and National Security Council. There are 4 guys who were supervising Biden full time, including 2 who wrote the famous letter that showed up on X, where he says, look, I'm not running anymore. This was written by Richetti and Mike Donilon. They wrote the fucking thing. And there's no letterhead, nothing. Dodgy Senior. They didn't even try to disguise it. So basically it was a white coup by the people, by the combo around. Obama, very influential in the white coup because Obama always treated Biden like, Huh? Everybody knows that in Washington. And of course, the problem is the whole thing was so fast that even America said, so who's the president now? There was never any president for, at least for the past year. If we are radical, for the past 3.5 years. Okay, for the past year. It's the combo. The president of the United States is the combo. And the combo is very dangerous. And the combo answers to big money, the donors. So it's not the combo that dictates policy. It's big donors, big money, the guys who really finance the Democratic Party. And these people are extremely dangerous because some of them we know and we have names like the Pritzker family in Chicago, for example. But we don't know the people who are at Vanguard, those invisible Vanguard shareholders who give the bulk of the money to the Democratic Party. That's why it's so dangerous. So it was a white coup. And obviously, you won't expect the New York Times or the Washington Post or CNN to say, look, there was a white coup here. No, they will never admit it. So what do? Beginning of our conversation, they change the narrative. And everything happened at the same time. The assassination attempt on Trump, the white coup, and out of nowhere, a woman, the cackling hyena, becomes the acting president of the United States. Just like that. And nobody says a word because the whole media is controlled, obviously. You're going to see it on independent media. You're going to see it on Judge Knapp, podcast of Judge Knapp. But that's it. But this reaches a small portion of the American population.
She is so fucking dumb. I don't think you can hide it. I mean, people throw words like moron and things. We throw them around too much, but in her case, it's inadequate. I mean, as a man with a little vintage, I have to tell you, I never thought the world would end up being as absurd it is right now. Pepe, you shine a light on my life. Are you okay if we try and open our some questions?
Absolutely. I'm dying. I'm a Q&A guy.
Before we
questions, guys. Yeah.
Okay.
Cheers, guys. Cheers, everybody. Now we're getting serious. Yes.
Oh, very good. Nice to meet you, Pepe. Thank you for
coming to
talk.
Thank you.
Talk to us here today in Samui. My question is about SEO and the integration with BRICS. How do you see it going forward? Do you think the two will merge at one point, or?
It's quite possible, and something that we heard at the latest St. Petersburg forum. There were several very important sections. There were several BRICS sessions. There were at least 2 SEO sessions. And diplomats from different SEO countries were there. They were saying, well, sooner or later, basically, this is the same club. There are many members. There are BRICS members and SEO members, like India, Russia, China, now Iran as well. Turkey wants to be member of both. Turkey is on the short list for both. And that's why the European Union and NATO are having a heart attack. It will happen because Erdogan is very, very clever. He did a Bob Dylan, which way the wind is blowing, over there. Okay, let's go. And this is Erdogan. He always thinks in these terms. He's a very good player, even if he doesn't understand the chessboard very well, but he plays well. So the problem is the internal rifts inside BRICS and inside the SEO. Some of them are ultra hardcore. And this is something that we hear from diplomats. For instance, in the SEO, Russia has to be the mediator between India and China. It will always be like that. And because both respect Russia, at least they listen to Russia. That's a good thing. Pakistan. Pakistan is also a member of SEO. India, Pakistan, we all know never there will be any sort of entente, right? Inside BRICS, for instance, this past year, I heard stuff that I was like, oh shit, it's much more difficult than we all thought. For instance, the discussions that they had for the new 5 BRICS, now when it became BRICS 10, they were like, wow. And they were pitting, most of them, they were pitting India against China. And Russia had to be the mediator all the time. So this is going to be very hard. And Lavrov is very frank. It's great. When you're talking to him face to face, he opens up because it's a relation of mutual trust. Now, if we are sitting on a table with Lavrov, means that the Russian foreign ministry trusts us. And they know that we're not going to say something that it's not on their modus operandi. And Lavrov said, look, our priority is first to accommodate the new members, which is called how we're going to get Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Emirates to agree on everything that we do. This is going to be very hard. And how we're going to get Saudi Arabia and Emirates to agree with India. So you see how complicated it is. Only the Russians can pull that off. because of the quality of their diplomatic representation, because that guy that I mentioned to you before, Sergei Ryabkov, he's the Russian Sherpa for BRICS. So Ryabkov is coordinating all the internal BRICS organization and how they are preparing for the summit in Kazan in October, right? So let's say optimistically, next year we have a stabilized BRICS 10 before it becomes BRICS 15 or BRICS 20, because the list is gigantic. It's over 40 that want to get into BRICS. And the SCO, there's another list of at least 10, 12, 15, same thing. But the SCO, next year they'll be thinking about Turkey, depending on how the situation evolves. The big prize for the SCO is to bring Turkey, because then it will be a pan-Eurasian security geoeconomic organization with all the main players. And the one missing is Turkey. So we can think reasonably that in the span of 2 years, they would start merging. And there have been signs already from the highest level. Lukashenko already said it's inevitable. Lukashenko is very important on SCO, and Belarus could become a BRICS member within the next 2 or 3 years. And the Union State, the relationship Belarus-Russia. And even Putin, in a very indirect way, has been saying that, the collaboration between the BRICS and SCO, this is a sort of cipher message, but not so cipher that the possibility is there, So from the point of view of both united, wow, it's essential, because then this would mean that the Eurasia Economic Union will also unite with them. Eurasia Economic Union, the two main countries are Russia and Kazakhstan. The Americans know that they cannot lose Kazakhstan. It's very complicated. When you go to Kazakhstan, you see the war of the clans in Kazakhstan. It's something that for us foreigners, it's hard work trying to understand what goes on inside Kazakhstan. But Kazakhstan has very good relations with Russia and China at the same time, and it's already a member of the SCO and wants to get into BRICS. So in the end, it's all converging. You see, so this is, let's say, the auspicious aspect of these new multilateral organizations, that they are getting together little by little. Maybe not as fast as we all wanted to, but it's happening. That's the most important thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Adi, for the question. Sorry, guys. I know there are a million questions. Thank you for the answer,
Yes.
Pepe. I'm just going to go to Tom and then Kayla.
Thank you, Pepe.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us here in Samui. I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say you're very welcome here. Now, we've seen some significant market turbulence over the past few days during this week. You mentioned earlier that Russia had been kicked out of the SWIFT system. You've been talking about BRICS. I'd like to continue on that theme. BRICS has been working on a trade settlement currency, and we expect that a catalyst for that to take effect may be a global financial markets crash or collapse. Would you say that the BRICS trade settlement currency is ready to go at the moment?
To be absolutely frank with you, not yet. You know why? First problem, Russia and China especially, and even India, will never accept a new currency that they don't control. So how are you going to come up with a system that satisfies all the major players? There is a system. It's something that I followed from the beginning in Russia since early last year. It's called the unit. And we did a story about this on Sputnik. And it was very, very funny because the Wall Street Journal saw our story. And then they start calling the unit guys, you want to talk to us? And they said, no. Because it's still an idea, a project. And just to give you an idea of how complicated it is. These guys came up with a system that it's a unit of exchange that is apolitical, right? They call it apolitical money, which is a very good definition. Based on gold and the currencies of the BRICS nations, 60% gold, 40% currencies of the BRICS nations. Basically for companies, for governments, not necessary for you and me. Like you cannot buy a cappuccino with a unit. No, that's not the idea. The idea is, example, an enormous Russian company wants to sell metalworks to an enormous Iranian company. They do this with this unit, and they don't have to think about the currency exchange between the ruble and the real. So it's very convenient for everybody. Problems. There is already... Yes. Somebody online? Is that it?
It's good.
Okay. There is a system called M-Bridge, which is clever. But the problem is it's related to the IMF and the World Bank and the European Central Bank. Apart from that, the idea is not bad. I'll give an example which many of you may know. Thailand buys oil from the Emirates using M-Bridge. So it has nothing to do with the currency. It has nothing to do with the Thai baht, nothing. Excellent. So the unit is something like this, was more sophisticated and more ambitious, and basically geared towards companies, enterprises. So the guys that came up with this idea in Russia, 2 Russians and 1 Chinese, they are trying to convince big Russian companies, so why don't you do a test run with the unit? Try to buy something from somebody and pay with units, and see how it works. So if you get big Russian, Chinese companies to do that, then it's the beginning of going towards a new international trade settlement system. But all that, guys, it's according to some of the people of the Russian Ministry of Finance, this could take years, if not decades. The problem is we all need this tomorrow. Tomorrow means the summit in Kazan, the BRICS summit in Kazan in 3 months from now. Now we are in August. Shit, it's in October, 2 months from now. And they need something at the summit to present to the 10 BRICS and say, look, this is our system for starting to have an alternative to dollar transactions. For the moment, there's this idea, the unit. There is M-Bridge, which is a problem because it's controlled by the West, essentially, even though China is part of it. There is another system that they say, okay, we're going to come up with a BRICS currency. But this is up in the air because they don't know, okay, how are you going to quantify this BRICS currency? What is the criteria? Is it commodities? Is it gold? Is it both? What about the exchange rates, the conflicting exchange rates of the different BRICS countries? So I'm just giving you how complicated it is, and the more we try to get answers from, Ministry of Finance, for instance, they told me in Moscow that there are 10 vice ministers of finance in Moscow, and they are all fighting against each other. How the hell you're going to find a solution in a situation like this? And of course, the first thing the Chinese said, yes, but there will be secondary sanctions by the Americans, whatever we try. So the Chinese are always, so you have to come up with something that will seduce big Chinese companies. This is just to give an idea how complicated it is. We are on our way, but the difficulties are immense.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Pepe. I'm going to go to Kayla now, and then I will open. Yep, and then I'll go to one Zoom question. So, Kayla.
Hi. Thank you so much. And sorry, I made notes because I have a lot of respect for you. So I guess my question is, I feel like a lot of people in this room, and myself included, we appreciate Putin and we have empathy for China. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that they're critical of the Western elite, which is kind of what we are and why we're here, because we see through the bullshit. But I think my question is, and I know, obviously Putin sees like the decay in the West and this kind of cultural slop and calls it out, and we see that. And so I think there's an appreciation. But I have Russian friends that aren't big fans of Putin because they feel that he's an authoritarian the same way that we in the West might feel of our own leaders. And I think many leaders probably have more in common with each other than the rest of us that sat here. So my question is, going forward, when the mass of people is so malleable that Kamala Harris, for example, was so unpopular, and now it's Harris, obviously, because of a tiny bit of propaganda that managed to switch everyone's brains because nobody has any memory. What do we do as a smaller, more informed group of people that have an issue with the kind of people that support, that crave power, because they're usually sociopathic types, regardless of nation state? What do we do going forward, especially when their desire to control us is becoming so scary with technology that there's now nano and biotechnology that they can potentially in 50 years' time control us from the outside in? Like, we can't turn off the TV to keep our minds. There might be things. So what do we do to combat what's coming?
Well, it's a question about technological control, essentially, isn't it? It's very complicated in this new race in the US because the people who are supporting Kamala, it's the bulk of Silicon Valley. And the agenda of Silicon Valley will well know what it is. It's total social control, which they already exercise, by the way. They were sufficiently clever to start ahead of everybody else. No? And on the Trump side, it's way more complicated because the only, let's say, new technology tycoon supporting Trump openly is Elon Musk. And exactly. And Peter Thiel is, wow, Peter Thiel is even more complicated because Peter Thiel, part of the old PayPal mafia, no? And he, by the way, he is very friendly with the Asia Times American bankers. So every time that he visited Hong Kong, I got the briefing about the dinner. Peter Thiel used to visit them in their houses, have dinner together, and all that. And Thiel is very, very dangerous. And once again, total social control, and even worse, directly linked with the Zionist project. So any way you look at it, we cannot, all of us, we cannot escape.
Basically, all of those tech companies.
I'm sorry?
All of the big tech companies, Facebook, all of them.
Yes.
They're all CIA funded and controlled. They all are extensions of the deep state. Right?
They are all extensions, exactly. They are all branches of the deep state. And the problem is they are directly interconnected with the big three, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. So we are talking about a tsunami of funds to support them. So everywhere we look at it, we are strangled. See? So what do we have on the other side? We don't have big tech companies. Okay, maybe some in China, maybe Yandex in Russia, but you cannot compare with the firepower, the technological firepower of Silicon Valley and the reach of Silicon Valley, the global reach of Silicon Valley. And the social agenda gets even more complicated because it's total social control via soft repression, and they are masters at it. And for instance, the new axis of evil, no? Russia, China, Iran,
they still don't understand soft power. When we have these conversations in Beijing or in Moscow or in Tehran, it's crazy. I had something that floored me in Tehran a few years ago. I was trying to have this conversation with an Ayatollah that was a regional governor. He had no clue about it. So, how do you proceed?
Okay, I'm sure we'll come up with a solution soon, Kayla. We'll all come up with a solution. Okay, thank you very much, Kayla, for the question. Thank you, Pepe. I'm going to jump into the Zoomers to see if anyone online. You see you there, Matt, Charles. Does anyone have a question? Yes, Matt? Okay.
Is Matt
okay, would you like to unmute?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. I missed the first little bit. I'm really, really happy, Pepe, that you had a chance to go down and meet that excellent group in Koh Samui. Yeah, I wish I could be there physically. It was a blast last time a few months ago. I've got a question regarding Bangladesh, and I don't know if maybe you addressed this before I hopped on, but it seems like the hand of Jamaat al-Islam was present in the student protest. Kids, I was reading reports where, basically members of this group had shaved their faces to take part in this. There was some strange CIA-connected groups as well, pushing for the ouster of Sheikh Hasina. And now you've got a military control. And I'm wondering, in your analysis, what's your take basically on Bangladesh? And is it possible that the military is not pro Jamaat al-Islam, or are they more, and what could be the spillover to that? Is there more of a danger of destabilizations in the broader region? But so what's your take on that whole story?
Matt, to be absolutely frank with you, I was not following Bangladesh this past few days because I'm concentrated on West Asia.
Okay.
But there is a but, and it's important. My best Pakistani sources say, and I trust them, and I have trusted them over the years. They say that this so-called coup is absolutely legitimate. I don't have enough firepower to counteract what they're saying. I think this is very, very tricky because a key objective of the American system as a whole was to destabilize Bangladesh. And the way they instrumentalized the student movement and the key role of a university that is financed directly by the Soros gang gives away the game. So I would wait for a few extra days because I think at the moment, none of us has a clear picture of what really happened. For instance, she's not going to stay in India. There's strong rumor that she's going to go to Belarus. This means she's going to the Union State. And this means that she is supported by Russia and Belarus, which she is, by the way. But at the same time, India, Pakistan, it's an even more complicated because both are they have been trying to control Bangladesh from outside for not years, decades. So when you have some of the best well-informed Pakistani sources who have civilian sources and military sources at the same time saying that this coup was inevitable and it's to the benefit of a new Bangladeshi system, so, you start thinking, right? But I think it's too early.
Thanks.
Following sort of CNN and Euronews and the established main channels, they're all talking about the deposed leader as the democratically elected leader. So they're certainly looking to try and post there as if this is a legitimate coup.
I'm sorry.
I'm saying that the media, the mainstream media, like your CNN, they are reporting it against it's a coup by violent extremists against the democratically elected government. So if we look at what the mainstream media is saying and then think that of the exact opposite, it seems that it is a genuine coup.
Rule number one, never pay attention to what they say because it's bullshit. Rule number two, if they say something, it's the absolute opposite. That's all you need to know.
That's the logic we were applying. Yeah. All right.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Matt, online for the question. Thank you, Eamon. Thank you, Pepe. So I'm gonna, before I go back to Zoom, I'm gonna jump to Trevor, and then Victor, and then I'm gonna go to Matthew Christensen online, and then I'm gonna come to Ido. Okay. So here's
have to say a quick hi to Matt. Eric, wish you were here too, mate. Back to Ari's question and your response to it regarding the divisions between countries. I would presume that this is often where they actually share a border, and hence the probability of a dispute historically being there. But would you say that if there is a sufficiently valuable project, not just in terms of monetary means, but in other values to the needs of each country, could that be the trigger which, through the working group you told me about earlier and other means, that we resolve those things and help it progress faster? Because you also mentioned after, in a response to, I think it was Tony's question about the difficulties in implementing some of these things, the solution to SWIFT and the petrodollar. And of course, they can't get to that until they first resolve other disputes between nations. So do you think that those projects, like from what we talked about earlier, like could be the things that trigger the resolution of conflict, and thus we can progress things faster?
Look, there is a mechanism inside BRICS. It's called BRICS Business Council. This is very, very serious. And the Russians and the Chinese obviously are the main protagonists, of course. They have been discussing the different possibilities for months now. And that's a problem. We are in August. They need to have something on the table, I would say within the next 2 or 3 weeks, so they can polish it and then present at the summit in October.
Thank you, Trev, for the questions. And thank you, Pepe. Okay, so we're going to jump back onto Zoom. So Matt Christensen, are you still there? Okay, if not, Dennis, you want to read his question?
So a question from Matt Christensen. When analyzing geopolitical events from the perspective of Tom Friedman's book,
oh my God,
The Storm Before the Calm, and the 80-year cyclical theory of governing systems and economic/institutional crisis, what is your analysis of what we can reasonably expect as these cycles converge in the next 2 to 3 years? Thank you, Matt.
Well, what we can reasonably expect is something that Wallerstein, which knows a little bit more of economics compared to Thomas Friedman, was saying 20 years ago, 30 years ago. We need a new world system. Maybe we are at the beginning of a conversation, dialogue, debate leading towards a new world system, which is something that our friend Michael Hudson has been writing brilliantly about since forever, in fact. Especially his latest essays are absolutely devastating. But Michael is an idealist. Michael still thinks that it's possible to have a globalized, socialized system. I don't think so. Because the extremely hardcore firepower by the international financial system at the moment, and the people who control that will never allow it. They would have to maybe coexist with a different system that will probably come out of the BRICS discussions when we have the top players of the emerging global majority agreeing on a new trade settlement system, a new international payment system, an alternative SWIFT, whatever you want to call it, and they will have to live with it. But then we're going to have a planet divided in two, which is something that we already have. Geopolitically, we are already divided in two. Soon, geoeconomically, we will be divided in two as well. You want to say something, Eamon? I'm sure you do.
I agree with you. What Michael Hudson is talking about is having a money system that isn't based on usury. Because usury,
exactly.
Right, okay, and that's the concept. You know, I mean, usury is what has enabled, empires and sucked all the wealth out of the productive classes for years. He is saying until you have an actual rethink about how you create money, you're never going to have a solution. Every 7 years there's a crash, a wealth transfer. So, yeah, I mean, for those that are not up on economics, again, Michael Hudson, peerless. Who's next?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Can I go to Victor?
Hello, Pepe. Nice and great to have you here. Hope you will make the inevitable decision to move from Bangkok to Samui in the near future.
You find me a house.
My question is a simple one. It's probably on everyone's mind in this room. Trump.
Yes.
Most of us would like to believe that he's the arch enemy of the deep state and the savior of the world. But is he?
No.
Is he the bearer of hope?
No.
Is he the bearer of hope, or is he controlled opposition, especially considering his relationship with Israel?
Controlled opposition because the Zionist lobby totally owns him. Not only him, but via Jared Kushner, especially. And Jared is very well connected, the least we can say. There is a redeeming quality to Trump. He's not a warmonger because he's a businessman. And he knows that from his point of view, war is bad for business. For instance, he only sees NATO in terms of a cash cow. Okay, you have to pay 2% or ideally 3%. You're not, okay, we have no use for you. He's very straightforward. Trump is a fascinating phenomenon, in fact, because he tries to pose as a working class leader. The guy is a billionaire that came from Queens. If you know New York, all of you who know New York, is on the wrong side of the bridge. So he was never accepted by the New York aristocracy and royalty. He was always treated like horrible taste, gold, came from the other side and all that. So he has this, I have to prove to them that I'm smarter than all of them, which is what he tried to do in Trump 1.0, right? The problem is he was surrounded by mediocre people. He's not very good at choosing people around him, number one. And number two, full force of the deep state against him. And he didn't know how Washington works. If you are a president of the United States and you don't know how Washington works, and you don't know that you need to have dinners every night to seduce these assholes to your views, you're fucked.
Well, let's do unplugged then. He understood, let's say, viscerally, the so-called China threat. As a businessman, they said these people are better business men and women than Americans. They have the technological initiative now, and they're going to surpass us. So he understood that. The problem is that the guys that he got around him, his China czar, Peter Navarro, these people, they are too mediocre. And they couldn't implement something intelligent as a policy apart from a tsunami of sanctions. So what we're probably going to have if he's elected starting from January is another tsunami of sanctions, but it's too late. You won't contain China with a tsunami of sanctions. And a lot of people inside the Republican Party, they don't even think in terms of sanctions. They think in terms of the existential threat of China. So this means we need to provoke them into a war, which the Americans cannot win because the Pentagon gamed everything, and everything that they gamed in the South China Sea, the Americans lose it. So this is an enormous problem. So he has this enormous appeal in Middle America, in the Midwest, in Central America, parts of the Deep South, as a defender of the average white American male. And that's what earned him votes. So he chooses as a vice president a guy with no experience whatsoever, invented by Peter Thiel, by the way. Peter Thiel fabricated J.D. Vance. He gave J.D. Vance $50 million for a startup in Silicon Valley. And this guy goes out and he says, all these cat ladies, childless cat ladies across America are an absolute disgrace. So immediately he alienates a crucial voting base for Trump. And that's why a lot of people well-informed in the Beltway are saying he's starting to lose the elections because of this guy, which is true. It's absolutely true. No, he won't be a savior, to answer your question, at all. In terms of foreign policy, he would have two priorities. One, try to find a sort of settlement with Russia, which the Russians will say, no, we have our list. We published our list in the middle of 2024. That's it. There's nothing else. And if you don't like it, the next list is going to be much harsher. So this would be number one. And number two, how to deal with China, which is going to be a tsunami of sanctions. That's it. And number three, which is even more worrying, because this aligns with all those hawks in Washington, Republican hawks, a war against Iran. So this is in the cards as well. So it's no wonder that Bibi, the main meeting of Bibi in the US was in Mar-a-Lago and not in Washington, unfortunately.
Thank you. Thank you, Pepe. Thank you for the question, Victor. Sorry, Trev. I'm going to go to Ido, and then I'm going to go to someone online with a question. Here's Ido.
West Asia and China, Russia, and Iran, but I'd like to emphasize a little bit on the West, but the others, I probably know that area better than the others. What's happening now is they're using Israel. It's not Israel, it's only one man who is an agent of the people up, and this is Netanyahu. In a sense, they've used Germany, and they're using Israel in a similar way. The German people, First World War and then the Second, and the Germans still feel guilt, but they had nothing to be ashamed about. They were used by the psychopath who was supported from up. Who have the app? The app are the vanguard, as you say, and they carry the money from the Vatican, from Rome, and then all the monarchy, and they have the money and the power. And then they're together with the secret societies, like the Freemasons and the Illuminati. And I just heard a video about Albert Pike, the head of the Freemasons in the 19th century, responsible in North America and Europe. And he forecasted the First World War between Germany and Russia and England. Second, using the Jewish-German issue to explode everything. And the third, to create what you have been describing, the war between the Israelis and the Arab world. And my question is, specifically, I'd like to mention that as I have zero guilt to Germans for decades, I mean, the Israelis are not to blame. They're being used exactly like the name that you rarely can pronounce, Hitler. So Netanyahu is devilish because the Illuminati there and the Freemason, and I mean, because vanguard there is controlling the West. Now, I thought that they initiated October 7th, you can call it 7/11 because 9/11 and October 7th, right? And they initiated that, which is now almost bursting. The people in Israel are frightened. They play with us as the Iranians are smart. They do that. But I thought that it's the interest of the West from insiders to create the 7/11, control Netanyahu and the Hamas at the same time, and ignite a war and scare the Israelis to death. because this is kind of a matrix thing to suck the energy, but that's a different story. So how, I thought the power is there in vanguard, but how is Russia, and Chinese supposedly should be partners of them. But you say within the partners, China, Russia, and Iran are not playing the game of the vanguard?
Excellent question. Look, he gave me, it's an excellent question because he gave me an opening for something that I wanted to read for all of you, even before I came here. And I finally got the final text. It's an interview. It's an amazing interview by a former IDF chief, which was a former Israeli Minister of Defense as well. And in this passage in the interview, he explains everything that is going on in the Israeli government and why they want this war. It's terrifying stuff. I'm telling you right away. Okay, let me first find it.
So just have a quick comment from Matt Errett online. And the fantastic researcher that he is, I'd probably suggest that he's onto this, but he says the Pike prediction of the 3 world wars is a forgery and was only discovered in the 1940s as a comment to the last. Yeah, fantastic.
Thanks, Matt.
So what I'm going to read to you, it's the crucial part of an interview by Moshe Yaalon. Moshe Yaalon was a former chief of staff of the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, and former defense minister. So in this passage, he basically tells the whole story of how, let's put it this way. Okay, what will be the headline? Scatological cult takes Israeli government hostage. This is the headline. And you're going to see why. So, okay, this is Moshe Yaalon speaking. When you talk about Smotrich and Ben Gvir, Smotrich and Ben Gvir are the ultra hardline members of the Israeli cabinet at the moment. They have a rabbi. His name is Dov Lior. Nobody outside of Israel knows about this guy, Dov Lior. But he's extremely popular in Israel because he's an ultra hardliner, an eschatological hardliner. He's a rabbi of the Jewish underground. And I like the way he puts it, because this is really a Jewish underground that is not underground. We're talking about at least 800,000 settlers armed to their teeth. Very few people in the West know about this. And this is something that you won't see discussed in the New York Times, Washington Post, or CNN. Okay. So we're talking about the rabbi of the Jewish underground who intended to blow up the Dome of the Rock. This is true. This guy has been saying that for a few years now, that their objective is to destruct the Al-Aqsa Mosque and rebuild the Jewish temple. So this is the #1 agenda. In fact, it has nothing to do even with the genocide in Gaza. Genocide in Gaza compared to this is an addendum. The most important thing is to destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque and rebuild the Jewish temple. And then obviously all those lands will be eternally Jewish, according to this scatological rabbi. Why does he want to do that? This is Moshe Yaalon speaking. He says, in order to hurry up the last war. They consider this literally the last war. This is how they talk in terms of the last war, or Smotrich's concept of subjugation. This concept of subjugation is the total subjugation of Palestinians and the Palestinian land, right? So he wrote an article about this a few years ago. This concept rests on Jewish supremacy. And now comes the clincher. These are the words of Moshe Shalom himself. Mein Kampf in reverse.
Can you all believe that we are talking about a resurgence of Mein Kampf in the beginning of the 21st century by Jewish people? And I'm not saying that. This is a former chief of the IDF. This is extremely serious. The thing is, you won't read about this anywhere. The only Western analyst who uncovered this interview, and then he published and he talked about it on one of the Judge Knapp's podcasts, is Alistair Crook, our friend. And he had to be Alistair, because Alistair is, I would say that Alistair is the #1 Western specialist on Israel-Lebanon, at least. Nobody knows more about Israel and Lebanon than Alistair. So the fact that he managed to uncover this interview was under the radar in the US. You don't see references in American media about this interview because it collapses the whole narrative. Everything, right? This is Moshe speaking again. My hair stands on end when I say that. I learned and grew up in the house of Holocaust survivors and never again. It is Mein Kampf in reverse. That is, once again, he's a Jewish supremacy. And then he quotes Smotrich, one of the ministers in the current cabinet. My wife won't go into a room with an Arab. I don't have to explain that, right? So what they want is to go to war, to the big war as soon as possible. And this connects to what basically Bibi wanted to get from his visit to the US. A go ahead. Because don't forget, the provocations came after his visit to Washington and after his talk to Trump. The attack on Beirut and the attack against Haniyeh in Tehran. So it's a war of Gog and Magog. How do you start the flames? It could be a massacre. It could be something that, and then he relates to Baruch Goldstein. He's a student of this rabbi, this crazy rabbi. Ben-Gvir, a member of the Israeli cabinet, he has a picture of Goldstein in his house. So these people are completely scatological fanatics, and they want a final war, and they think they will prevail. This is what the craziest part, you know. And he finishes with, I would say, the definitive quote. This is what goes into the decision-making process in the Israeli government. So this is a former minister of defense who has access to everybody that has power in Israel, basically telling it like it is. So we all have reasons to be extremely concerned and frightened because this is what they want. And this is what they're getting the US Congress to agree to. This is what they got Trump to agree to. And the combo, not the crash test dummy, but the combo theoretically agreed to it. And now the combo is looking at the possible response by Tehran and the axis of resistance, say, oh shit, we're going to be in the middle of this. What next? Because they don't know. They never had a plan A. Can you imagine plan B? The plan A was designed by Tel Aviv, which is this total Armageddon war, which they think they can win. And you know what I'm telling you, it's the craziest thing is that what I'm telling you is not a conspiracy theory. It's told by a very powerful Israeli character. And obviously there's no repercussion about this in the West, because if you have this on the front page of the New York Times, tomorrow there's no more money going to Israel. It's the same thing as having, look, the official story of 9/11 was an absolute joke. This is what really happened on 9/11. And guess who's going to be directly implicated in what really happened in 9/11? Tel Aviv. Not Osama bin Laden in a fucking cave in Afghanistan. Everybody knows that. So that's why it's so serious. I think I wanted to read this to you to convey how serious the situation is, and especially the fact that we have 800,000 armed to the teeth settlers controlling a government in Tel Aviv, and there's absolutely nothing you can do to talk to these people or to put them on the table, and to put them on the table even to talk to the Americans. No, it's impossible. It's an eschatological cult, and they're going all the way now because now they see an opening. I'm sorry to give you so many bad news, just one go, but that's the way it is, unfortunately.
Thank you. Great question, Ido, and great answer, Pepe, because I'm sure you're going to lift everybody's spirits soon with an uplifting message of hope.
Yes, the uplifting message of hope is Koh Samui will prevail.
Koh Samui, great. Okay, thank you very much. So can we go for another question on Zoom? A quick one? Okay.
A quick question from iPad user 2, doesn't have a name, but Pepe, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin was the question.
I don't have any thoughts on Bitcoin.
Okay.
People tried me a few years ago. People tried to, why don't you buy a lot of Bitcoins? I should have, because at the time it was 2,000. So obviously I lost a lot of money. So I forgot thinking about it.
Great. Thank you for the question, iPad 2. iPad 2. Thank you for the question. Okay. I'm just wondering, Drago, do you have a question from Serbia?
Yes.
Okay.
Serbia.
Go ahead.
Yes. First of all, I just want to say it's an honor to listen to you in person. I admire you completely. I've quoted you a number of times. I think you're a giant in geopolitical analysis. And I just wanted to ask you a few questions about Russia and about what's going on there. First of all, I want to ask you, would you be okay with me quoting you on what happened to almost happened to Putin when the Kiev regime tried to assassinate him or was planning to?
Yes, I can answer you now because I was looking into it this afternoon, in fact. And I was looking at reconfirmation of what Ryabkov said in the interview that he gave to Russia 1. Basically, Ryabkov, Deputy Foreign Minister of Russia and the BRICS Sherpa, he gave this was really amazing. He gave an interview to Russia 1, the main news channel in Russia, talking about a plot to assassinate Putin and the Minister of Defense on the day of the naval parade in St. Petersburg. We talked about this in the beginning of our conversation, right? So Ryabkov gave this interview, and then the Russian Foreign Ministry reconfirmed what he said, and basically saying, look, he did not give details because he can't, because this is a matter of national security and involves national security agencies. But what he said was essentially that there was a plot that was uncovered by Russian intelligence, and that led to that famous phone call of the Russian foreign minister calling Austin in D.C. saying, are you sure about this? If you do this, you're fucked. So this is in the beginning of our conversation. So this is absolutely correct. So this proves once again that now that they are losing, the numbers are absolutely staggering. Shoigu said that the Ukrainians in the past 2 months, they lost almost 100,000 people, which is completely absurd. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so, I actually calculated the numbers, and you're right. I calculated the numbers based on the number of shells that the Russians are firing, as well as the advantage in the aviation. So right now it's 10 to 15 to 1, essentially. 10 to 15 to 1.
You're right. You're absolutely right, Drago. So, and the front is collapsing all the way. But this is Russia. When you say the front is collapsing all the way, they get one village here, 3-4 days later, they get another village there. So this could go on until the 24th century. It's the Russian tactic. It's attrition war. very, very slowly. Absolutely crazy artillery from all over, snail pace, meat grinder. This is the Russia way of waging war. So this can go on forever. What the discussion in Moscow at the moment is that, okay, can we have an opening to end this before the end of the year? It won't be meat grinder, snail pace. You have to be, okay, let's conquer the whole of Donetsk, which they still don't have it, the whole of Kherson and Zaporizhia, which they still don't have it. And can we go a little further? That's state secret. Nobody knows this. Only Putin, Gerasimov, the chief of staff, and maybe the new minister of defense. Maybe he doesn't know. This is a major state secret because you go to a restaurant in Moscow at night, everybody's okay, when we get to Odessa, is that we won't get to Odessa in the end. In the end, after 10,000 liters of vodka, but no, we won't go to Odessa. Just look at the pace, you know. And signs by Putin we're going to get to Odessa are very ambiguous so far. He never said we are going to liberate Odessa. Never. He says Odessa is a Russian city, which is factually correct, but that's it, you know. So depending on what kind of terrorism those NATO lunatics are going to go for within the next 3-4 months, maybe we could have, let's say, a second Russian offensive. Otherwise, these things will keep going very slowly. And at the end of the year, with Trump is elected, there is this interval between December, early January. Trump and Putin sit down and they work out something, which nobody knows what will be, especially because the Russian conditions are very strict. And the project that we read, elaborated by people close to Trump, the Russians are going to read that and they're going to laugh. They say, "Are you joking?" So it's not going to happen. So nothing much is going to change on the front line apart from this slow grind and this decimation of Ukrainian soldiers, which is completely crazy. These people, some of them, they had training of 1 week and they are in the middle of a hot front line under apocalyptic artillery. It's completely absurd. You know, that the decision by Kiev is to kill as many Ukrainians as that's it. It's the war until the last Ukrainian, and that's why NATO loves it. You know, even if NATO has collateral damage as a Eamon.
Yeah, I think what it's come down to now, this is BlackRock's war. So BlackRock have basically bought up most of the Ukraine. The problem is the valuable parts of the Ukraine are now the Russian parts. That's where their industry is, their natural resources. The part that BlackRock are left with is farmland, good farmland, but the natural resources are no longer in their domain. So a lot of how this ends is going to be decided by BlackRock et al. All right? It's no longer about the military situation. That's, if you like, a given. That's just the take. Your take was brilliant, by the way.
Okay. Pepe, thank you, Eamon, and a great question, Drago. So
thank you, Drago. Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The clock is ticking. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop the questions here. We have the socializing afterwards, and I'm sure that Pepe would like another soda water, double vodka, double gin. So out the front, we can socialize and we can ask questions. So I'd like to finish the session with the uplifting message of hope from Pepe for the future.
Uplifting message of hope is, at least now, compare, for instance, with the mid-50s, with the beginning of the non-aligned movement, which was later totally decimated by the Americans all over the world, which was at the time a process of independence of the third world, of the end of neo-colonialism, the beginning of sovereignty for most nations of the third world. It didn't work very well. The difference now is that we have a set of multilateral organizations who are working towards a more equanimous, a fair, a just system of international relations, and we have firepower behind it, especially Russia, China, India, and Iran. BRICS, BRICS 10, expansion of BRICS, SCO, Eurasia Economic Union, the BRI projects, the Belt and Road projects, the New Silk Roads, the new association of the Sahel countries who are finally expelling French neocolonialism. Some instances in Latin America, but that's Latin America is a gosh. Well, okay, but there are some glimmers of hope in parts of Latin America, in Africa, all over Southeast Asia, ASEAN. ASEAN has finally growing a set of balls and being more forceful, and half of ASEAN wants to be part of BRICS as well, which in itself is already very, very important. One of the best sessions at the St. Petersburg Forum was on ASEAN, relationship between Russians, Eurasia Economic Union, and ASEAN. There were 4 ASEAN countries on the table out of 10, which is great. Thailand was not there, and when the Thais knew why we're not there, why they did not invite us, that's late, because you didn't volunteer to be invited, you know. So next time we're going to have Thailand as well on the table. So this is the auspicious message, and the fact that this process of Eurasia integration, which includes Afro-Eurasia, parts of Latin America, ASEAN, parts of South Asia, etc., Central Asia as a whole, all the Central Asian stands, they want to be part of it, and they are as part of the SCO as well. So this is the auspicious message. It's long, it's thorny, it's painful, it's going to take a long while, but it has already, this high-speed train has already left the station. And this is the main reason why the people who control the current system, the post-1945 system that we live, that's why they're frightened, because now there is a counterpower. It's still forming, it's still organizing. Internal dissent is an enormous problem, but the leaders, and essentially the leaders are Moscow and Beijing. We cannot escape that. India is an extremely, we will need 10 days in the bunker to talk about India, but it's extremely complicated. India, they cannot solve their own internal problems, so they cannot be a leader of the global south. Forget it. And Iran is becoming little by little, a leader of the global majority as well, and respected even in the Sunni lands of Islam, along with the axis of resistance. The fact that the axis of resistance exists is already an auspicious thing. We can connect them with the Sahel axis of resistance in Africa. We can connect them with the Christian Orthodox axis of resistance in Donbass, which is something that I had a personal experience that was, it shook me to the core. I was following Christian Orthodox battalions in Donbass, where there was an itinerant priest traveling around with an icon, a very, very rare icon. And he was going from battalion to battalion to bless the battalion, to show the icon, and people would, pay their respects to the icon and pray together. And all of them had signed contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense to defend their land. So when you see the physical and spiritual power of these people, say, wow, there's no war against them, that they will never lose a war against anybody. So you see these instances of hope a little bit everywhere in the global majority. So this is what makes us dream that reorganizing the world system, as Wallerstein used to talk about, is possible, but it's a very long struggle. And we need Koh Samui on it.
Yay! Thank you. Great ending. Yes. Thank you so much. Especially the last part. I love. Yeah. I just thank you. I mean, like you said, we would probably need 10 days in the bunker to talk about this. Well, maybe next year, if we do another conference, you'll come to a conference. Do we want Pepe at the conference next year? Yes. we've already convinced Matt. Matt and Cynthia are coming, right? Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been an honor. Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say, if I may, I just want to say to Matt Errett, originally we got in contact through Matt, I believe, to Eamon, and this is over a year, like literally it's a year and a half. When Eamon was trying to email, and then finally we finally got you in the bunker, and we're all happy about this. But we'd like to see you back again very soon, hopefully more often and for longer. Yeah. And we'd like to see everyone on Zoom back here, because many people watching tonight have been here. Matt and Cynthia have been here. Alex Craner unfortunately couldn't make it, but Matt, you're coming back next year, right, buddy? Yeah?
Wouldn't miss it.
Yeah, great.
Cheers.
Okay,
Cheers,
so
everybody.
just to say thank you very much to
Thanks,
all the
guys.
people for tuning in. It's great to see you, everybody. Charles Corvus in Australia, Matt and Cynthia and everyone. Drago, thank you. Stuart in Australia, Steve. And thank you very much, everybody. And again, let's give Pepe and his lovely wife, Stephanie, another hand for joining us. Thank you. Okay, guys, as you know, we're just going to socialize in the front. I mean, feel free. Yeah. Feel free to help take the big chairs in the front and use the